Hey, so as you might be aware, we are celebrating a big milestone for this channel. 1 million views, which is bananas to me. Thank you guys so much. I am so grateful and thankful, and I'm a writer, but I've run out of words. I said that I would do an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, about plants, me, whatever, and if I picked your question, I would give you a year's membership to Plantrums Patreon on me. I wish I could do it on YouTube, but the membership gifting rules are funky. So what I'm gonna do is go through your questions here and do my best to answer them. What plant throws you the most tantrums? Is it something itchy and scratchy like poison ivy, or perhaps it's sticky and icky and everyone and their grandmother asks why you're not growing it? It's amaranth. This time last year I had really bad allergies. Like, I could not sleep. I was so congested. Broke down and went to an allergist. I got the whole test, you know, the pinpricks and then more pinpricks and all of that stuff, and found out that I was allergic to dogs, dust mites, cockroach dust, which they said is usually in canned food, the mold in soil, and amaranth. Amaranth was one of the big ones, which sucks. I love that plant so much, and I'm not gonna stop growing it because I just love it too much. So what I've done is I got long gardening gloves like the ones that people who prune roses get, and I just have to practice avoiding getting amaranth and soil on my skin. How do you pick and manage your potting mixes? Cat litter tubs is usually how I store them. That's how I store my hydroponics. The chunky mix that I make for myself, and obviously clean them out first, fill them up, and then I Sharpie the top what it is. For how I pick my potting mixes, if I'm buying them from the store, I usually go for Coastal something. Let me go check. Coast of Maine. And the only reason I picked them is they had really good mixes, like blends. It seemed really chunky, but had good stuff in it. So they haven't done me wrong. I will point to whichever one I use, but I've really been trying to move more to semi-hydroponic for the plants that I can. I find it's just easier for me as someone with ADHD. Allegedly, you use less water with semi-hydroponics. I don't entirely believe that, but I have found that my plants seem to be way more tolerant of my ADHD neglect cycles on semi-hydroponics. So that's what I've been moving towards. Right now I use pumice. That is my main medium. I have some pon in there and some leca balls, but I just gravitate more towards pumice. It's cheaper and seems to be doing a pretty good job. How do you find the histories of plants? Now, a number of you have asked some variation of this. Basically, how do I start my research? And I have a really frustrating answer for you. It's nothing special. My work involves researching plants for clients and writing about them. So same thing, like I'll start with a source. For a history of plants, I will find like a little factoid that I find interesting, and it kind of sends me on a rabbit hole. And then I start to build the outline for the episode based on the research that I find. But also in college, my degree was a Bachelor of Arts focused on psychology, sociology, and history. Consequently, I had to write a lot of papers. So I just learned how to research really well. And I have a lot of teachers and librarians in my family. So I think that's just sort of the amalgamation of how this research knack happens. If I could give any advice on how to do it, read a lot. I love reading books that kind of have groupings about plants, and I take notes about them. Two examples are The Drunken Botanist, I just finished reading, and Around the World in 80 Plants. These sort of compilation books are really great for getting that spark going. Or I'll find out something from you guys in the comments about why you want me to cover this plant or something like that, and so that's how I get my research started. It starts with a spark, I guess. I take detailed notes, and then I usually give myself a week to research 4 plants because I like to film in groups of 4 episodes. If I had to do it like one at a time, I'd never do it. And then a week of scripting. And then Monday and Thursday, the first Monday and Thursday of the month is when I like to film. That's the process. So I give myself allotted time. I read voraciously or listen to audiobooks or something and keep track of interesting things that I find. That's, like I said, that's not a satisfying answer. There's no secret to what I do. It's just what I've done since I was in university, and it works. What good value plant lights would you recommend for those of us who can't get enough sun indoors? So all of my lights in my cabinets are Barina T5s, and the only reason I use those currently is because the other lights that I had were ones that had a timer on the cord, and anytime I shut them off, I'd have to start the timer all over again, and ADHD, like, I'd forget. Also, I really like that they're magnetic, so I could just right on top. But they are expensive. The ones that I had before, and I will link to them, were fine. They got a little hot, so I'd recommend, if you're gonna go with those, do another plug for them. I also really love full spectrum aquarium lights. I have a bunch of them because I had a lot of aquariums back in the day. Right now I only have 3, which is still a lot, granted. But I love those because they're full spectrum, so they cover all of the wavelengths that plants need. They have timers usually, and they're long bars. So you can, I used a Gorilla mounting tape to put them originally under this cabinet, and that's where my propagation box and my moss box live. But they can be kind of spendy too. So my best recommendation for value lights for indoor plant growth is to get a bulb that has the full spectrum in it. They're a little more expensive than, you know, just your standard light bulb, but they're not too bad. And the best tool is the one that you can use regularly, right? So go to Goodwill, get a gooseneck lamp, get any kind of lamp that would work for over your plants. I recommend gooseneck or something that so you can keep it above the growth. Put a bulb, a grow light bulb in, you're good. As for like, should you use the purple lights or the white lights? I don't know, to be totally honest. I use the white lights. I don't like the purple lights. I haven't had success with them. Some people have though, so your mileage may vary. Whatever works best for your plants, go for it. If you want to like go all out, try getting lights that do both and test and see how that goes. But in terms of value, I'd start with full spectrum light bulb and a gooseneck lamp. Aquarium lights, the other lights that I mentioned that were originally, they're like some knockoff brands, that's why I don't remember them, and the T5 Barina lights. That's probably like the order of operations that I would go for that. Was there ever a turning point plant that you took care of that made you realize you had such a profound love for plants? Or was it a more general sentiment that turned into a hobby and career? The one that comes to mind is probably the Tri-Constellation Monstera. I got mine on Etsy right around when it, not when it first came out, I would say right before, not right before, let me start that again. I got mine in the middle of the variegation boom around the pandemic, and so I paid more for mine than you would now, but it was just fascinating to me. That and the White Wizard Philodendron. Those two at the time, I was just completely blown away by seeing how variegation could work, and like the half moon variegation or the sort of constellation that the Thai constellation has, things like that. And that just led me down the rabbit hole of pink princess, philodendron, black cherry, you know, all of these different variegations. I had no idea that plants could have that kind of coloring, and so I think that that probably took me down the rabbit hole into what else there was, and like black plants and purple plants and all of it, and then moving from marketing and financial writing into gardening writing, you know, it just kind of fed itself. The flywheel started running, and that is how I ended up with 250 plants. And to give some context and clarity on that, if you think about 250 plants, It is a lot, right? But I want to specify that many of my plants are small. They're cuttings or starter plants or things like that. I have a lot of ones that are larger, and they can be a problem when I'm trying to find a place to put them, but a majority of mine are pretty small. If you want to see how nerdy I am about it, I have a spreadsheet tracker that I will show you a screenshot of that breaks it down by the type of plant I have, if it's alive or dead, how much I paid for it, the size of it, and the location of it. And I'm kind of okay about updating that, but not great. That was a clearly way too long explanation for what you asked, but yeah, I'm sticking with that answer anyways. What made you decide to start this series? For a while I was doing plant care videos that were science-backed, so I wanted to show you the studies or the research, the scientific research that had been done on why this plant acts this way, or, you know, like how we know that this is a better method than that for caring for it, so on and so forth. But that wasn't really gaining a lot of traction. In the middle, I would do plant roundups of cool plants that I had found. So like plants with dragon in their names, or goth plants or stuff like that. And I had an idea to do a roundup of houseplants that could kill you, and wanted to find court docs or things that showed like this plant was used as a weapon, but I couldn't find those. However, I ran across the story of someone using Dieffenbachia, a dumb cane, as a way to silence someone who was going to testify in court. Dumb canes are one of the plants that have calcium oxalate crystals in them, which are described as like they're being like needles. And so shoving that plant into someone's mouth and kind of going like that would render them unable to speak or dumb. And it was also used to punish slaves in the Caribbean. It had a really fascinating and complicated history. So I gave up the idea of trying to do the roundup and instead decided that I was going to do the complicated history of the dumb cane. And I thought, let's see how this goes. But why not make it a podcast too? Because I'm not showing you the plant really, like, you know, stock footage and b-roll and stuff like that, yes, but it could also work as audio too. So let me see if this works. And when I released the complicated history of the dumb cane, it took off in relation to the videos that I had been doing before. That was so, like, it actually made me nervous. I wasn't prepared for how well that one went. And yeah, like, you think you'd be really excited about people really enjoying it, but it just made me nervous. I wasn't ready for, I was expecting sort of like a gradual transition, and I wasn't ready for, like, you know, 200 views to 20,000 views. It just was way big and way overwhelming, but it showed the proof of concept worked. So that's how it went from there. And I get ideas from plants from you guys in the comments, or when I stumble across something in the books that I read, or the articles that I write, and the research that I do. That's pretty much how it worked. Yeah, it's been really cool, and it's been really interesting to see not only how much you guys like it, but how much I get to learn. And I know that sounds like, well, duh, but I would have no impetus to look up chemistry for a plant if I didn't want to tell you guys about what makes this plant so great or interesting or scary and deadly or what. That is the thing that makes it really just cool, is that because this is so interesting to you, it gets to be a learning experience for me just as a nerd. And it's cool that we can share that together. I'm a nature lover who's also biomimicry enthusiast to do reverse engineering of nature genius. However, as a non-biology background, I struggle to choose and grapes lots of topics. Hope I can get an answer from you. I think there's a translation thing going on here, so I apologize if I get the answer that you're looking for wrong. Basically, I think how I recommend you narrow down things to focus on in research. I think it depends. When you're trying to research plants and trying to find ways to explain the world better to you. The best way that I have found is to start with the lowest friction, the lowest hanging fruit on what is interesting to you about it. Is it the color? Is it its growth pattern, a vine versus a bush or something like that? Is it how old it is? Is it like an heirloom cutting or something like that? Start there and figure out what it is about a collection of plants that makes it so interesting from you. And from there, you're going to pick up a trail that can get into a rabbit hole very quickly. So try your best to limit your focus based on your time. For me, I stick to 4 or 5 subjects. With that, I'm able to really narrow down my focus. I know that my histories of plants are pretty widespread in their coverage, but they aren't complete. They're not, I never get all of the pop culture references right, or, you know, like I will miss studies and things like that, and just have to be okay with that. You can pick it up later if you have more time, but that's what I think. If you're, find out the thing that you are most interested in at first, use that as a jumping off point, and then just sort of try and keep some bumpers on for how far you're willing to go into it in the time that you have. If you don't limit yourself into restrictions, then you can end up in rabbit holes for days. I speak from experience. My question, how was your 2025 and what plant thing are you looking forward to the most in 2026? 2025 was good. I got to talk to you guys so much. January 2nd was when the Complicated History of the Dumb Cane went out, so it was a year of the history of plants, and talking with you guys, learning about more plants, learning about more plant history. The negative side was that my client work has gone down because it's just, that's how it is. It's a longer conversation, but a combination of AI, marketing budgets, and Google completely decimating the need to click off to blogs with their helpful content update. All of that has just kind of wrecked the industry. So I have 2 clients right now, but it's kind of precarious. And so that is that's the good and the bad with 2025. 2026, the thing I am most looking forward to is expanding my garden and enclosing it. Like I said in the 1 year ago, I had an idea video. I have to fight squirrels they stole my watermelons. And I was so upset because they were so cute. They were little sugar baby watermelons, I think. Is that what they're called? And like they were growing and I was so excited, and then they were gone. And that hasn't been the only thing that the squirrels have taken, but I remember that particularly and how bummed I was. So I originally had a plan to use like U-poles and hardware cloth and kind of make, you know, like a whole enclosed space. But I saw someone on Reddit used a old chicken coop and they put it on cinder blocks. And that's basically what I need. So I think I might use that idea instead. It would be way less work than having to do it all myself. And I can put it on cinder blocks too to give it some height, because like my husband's 6'2", and so the highest ones I've been able to find are like 6'5", and that's not great. So if I put it on cinder blocks, that'll give him some more height, and hopefully that will help him in the garden too. But I'm kind of worried about it too, because we get really crazy winds here in around like right when the seasons change. So the bursts get to like 40 miles an hour. It's not great, and I have some worry about just like the chicken coop flying off. I mean, I know they're heavy, but it's something that I worry about. So I have to sort of figure out how, if I put it on cinder blocks, to secure it and stake it down. And then I already bought hardware cloth in anticipation of this project. So if I do decide to use the chicken coop instead of doing it all myself, the hardware cloth that I will use, I will kind of dig down and put it sort of like a slope so that nothing can dig under it. That's what I'm most excited for, plant-wise. What was your very first houseplant? Is it still alive? I'm not sure. I think my first houseplant was my aloe plant. It is very pot-bound right now. I don't know why. And I know why, but I repotted it. I divided it and repotted it last year. It had so much more space in it. But by the end of the summer, I don't know what fertilizer or whatever I have used that have made it. I don't use fertilizer on my aloe and my succulents, so I don't know what it was, but it has grown so many more babies in the span of a really short amount of time that it is really overcrowded. But it is now winter, it's dormant. This is not the time to repot it. You should repot it right when it's about to start with the growth season again. So it's staying there as is for now. I will repot it again. I don't know why it has become a freak of nature. I think I got it in 2017 or 2016. That's when I started getting houseplants because we had just moved into our first house, and so I had space. So I think it was my aloe, and I still have it. I still have its kids and a few of its grandkids, although I've given some of those away because it's just too many. In your desk editing area, there is a red hula hoop at the wall. Is it a hula hoop? I thought I could pull it out, but it's stuck right now. It is. It is a hula hoop. I hate cardio. I'm really bad at it. It's just a combination of ADHD and overwhelm that I just can't keep a regular cardio thing, but I sit and write a lot. So I need to move my body, especially as I'm getting older. And I have found that hula hooping is awesome. It is fun. I'm so bad at it, but I just, like put on my AirPods and just go. I love it. I recommend it if you, one, can find a place where no one can watch you, and two, you have the space for it because obviously you have to hoop around. It's cool. I like it. It is a hula hoop. I definitely recommend it if you're trying to find a way to incorporate cardio into your life, even if you're bad at it. Megan, what do you think about worms? Pro. I have to ask, it's one thing to love plants, but it's another to learn so much about them and share that knowledge. So what drives you to do that? That is a really good question. I think it probably comes just from being a writer and having to create explanations for clients to publish on their sites or in their newsletters. So I think that that's where that comes from. Just my job made it so that I was doing explanations and how-tos and tutorials and stuff like that for clients. And so it just it was ingrained in me that I can do that for myself too. I think that's my answer. What plant has made you feel like it has the most awareness of you and how? Probably calatheas or peace lilies. No, calatheas. And the reason I say that is because I don't particularly think they're aware of me exactly, but I can see, one, it's cool to see them fold up at night, and it's not a easy, fast process, so it's not but it's kind of cool to look over and see all of the leaves are kind of like this, or after watering to see them kind of perk up again, especially with peace lilies since they're such drama queens. So I think that's, yeah, calatheas and peace lilies. Okay, now I'm gonna go over to the desk and answer questions that require research. Let's go. Okay, welcome back to the desk for two probably unsatisfying questions that I had to research, but one that I forgot to answer was, what is that blue stuff that's sometimes on your thumb? And I put it on there just for you today. This is KT tape. I use it because I have such a millennial problem. I have a condition called texting thumb, where this tendon or muscle, whatever, feels very irritated. And I don't know how it works, why it works, or if it's just a placebo effect, but whenever I put this on, it stops the irritation so I can scroll more. That's just what it is. Okay, back to the questions that I actually put some light research into. What are some of the best ways to increase humidity for plants? Do the rocks under the pots really work, or misting? So I'm of the opinion that no, they do not work. Because the difference in levels between rocks, like a tray of rocks, a plant pot, plant stalks, and leaves, there's a lot of height differentiation there relatively. So evaporation doesn't happen in a straight line, right? Like it happens out. And that's the science that I have learned from places like Penn State University. There's a couple of others, I think, maybe University of Iowa, that it doesn't work. But there are some studies that say it can work. In terms of misting, no, it doesn't work. And what it attracts instead are aphids or bacteria or fungi or things. And so it doesn't work the way you would hope. What I usually recommend is putting your plants together to create a microclimate, and this helps raise their collective humidity, but it also is a temporary solution. So if you have really tropical plants that require high humidity, then you're gonna want to put them in a plant cabinet, a cloche, something like that. You want to enclose the space so that the water doesn't have any way to evaporate. It doesn't have anywhere to go. It'll accumulate and then come back into the plant's leaves. So it creates this cycle. But you don't want it to be completely sealed either, because you do want some occasional airflow through there. I did an experiment where I used a giant plastic, like a Ziploc bag, and put my plants in it, and that works for a couple of weeks. So it's really good for if you're going on vacation or something, but especially if you put it like in the sunlight or something, you don't want to do that for very long, because you're going to attract, it just becomes too much of a, you create the greenhouse effect, right? So you want a cabinet or a cloche or something that can either be opened regularly or isn't that well sealed. For most tropical plants, you're looking at around ideally 60 to 80% humidity, and your house would be awful if it was at that level. So the best way to do that and keep your house mold free and everything is to enclose your plants in a space. Again, you don't want it to be completely sealed. You want it to be somewhere that it has airflow still. And that's another reason that I always recommend putting fans in a plant cabinet, because it's just, yeah, it keeps the airflow moving, and so it keeps it from getting stale. Long story short, group your plants together, put them in a cabinet or a cloche. How many times historically can be pointed to of plants being brought in as an invasive species to new territories, specifically as an act of war against a population? So there's a pretty cool thread about this on History Stack Exchange. Based on, again, my late research, nobody really knows. Nobody really knows if there is any sort of definitive list about that, but doesn't seem like it. But I was thinking about your question, and one thing that came to mind was plants that have been brought in to facilitate warfare. And the one I'm thinking specifically of is hemp. In, I can't remember if it was the 1500s maybe, Spanish brought hemp over to plant in Mexico because they needed it to produce ropes and sails and things for their navy. As you'll see in the upcoming History of Plants video about it, hemp is used in sailing. It's used to make the sails. The word canvas we get from cannabis. Canvas as in the sails, not like canvas as in a paint canvas. Maybe, I don't know. The research I saw said sails specifically. But it breaks down in seawater, so you have to keep replacing these. So it would make sense for the Spanish to come over here with their conquistadors and keep their navy running and operable as they are moving goods back and forth, or people, or armadas and ships and things that they would need more sails, ropes, all of those things. And so that's why they planted hemp over here. Now, is that a direct act of war? Not really, but I guess you could kind of argue that it was brought over to a new territory specifically to facilitate an act of war against a population. So I think that there are some cases in history where they're sort of unintentionally brought over as a hostile act, but I don't think that there's any sort of list that anyone else can find either that seems to fit that profile. I want to know what the coolest adaptation of any plant in your opinion is. My first thought is variegation, and just how fascinating that is, especially because it's this genetic anomaly. But that's not really necessarily an adaptation. I was thinking like, it's a genetic accident, but so many things in evolution have been a genetic accident. So back and forth on that. So I think that carnivorous plants, to me, are the plants that have the coolest adaptations. That they found their soil to be so lacking that they found another way to get the nutrients they needed by utilizing the fauna of the local population. Genlissia is one of my favorites. It's not really talked about a lot. I talk about it on my 3 carnivorous plants last milestone video, actually, now that I think about it, where it has developed this intricate root system that's basically like a labyrinth, that it gets nematodes and phytospora. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. It's not something like that. No. Fuck. What was it? It doesn't matter. They get nematodes and like bacteria or something into this labyrinth that can't get out. That is such a cool thing to me. It had realized that it had essentially junk DNA that it could rework and utilize to its advantage to build these root labyrinths, and that is so cool to me. But Venus flytraps are amazing. I love them. Pitcher plants, I do okay with them. I'm not great with them. Sundew plants, same thing. Any way that they have been able to evolve into such a way where they are able to say, I don't need your shitty soil. I'm going to do it myself. Oh, and corpse flowers. That's amazing. Awful, obviously, because it smells so bad. It smells like death and rotting and feces because it wants to attract flies, and that's where it gets like, that's cool. So yeah, that's my answer. A question for a fiber-eccentric episode: are bast fibers generally support structure, vascular tissues, or both? So I did some kind of cursory is probably a better word, research on this, because in my head it was they are both. And it seems like the internet research world agrees with me. If you're unaware, bast fibers are the fibers in plants that are used to basically hold it upright. But we utilize those as fiber for cloth, rope, stuff like that. Hemp, again, is one of the best examples of that. It was originally utilized for structural support, but I would argue that over time, maybe not over time, maybe it just sort of, I'm going to stick with over time. The plants evolved to utilize that and optimize it to their advantage, and so had it support vascular tissues in addition to structure. Which one came first? In my head, it would be structure, but I could see an argument for vascular too. So that's probably a really unsatisfying answer. Sorry. Chestnut and chinquapin trees hold a prominent place in the nutritional development of early southeastern United States. Is there any rational possibility of reseeding the losses from the virus that devastated these life-giving trees? Quick run over if you're unfamiliar. American chestnut trees were considered the redwoods of the eastern coast, and they were giant trees, grew 100 feet tall, beautiful. They supported Appalachia because in both their timber and nut production, there was a whole economy around it. But chestnut blight came in, Japanese chestnut blight, I think it was, and destroyed most of the colony throughout the eastern coast. We still do have American chestnut saplings, but anytime they get a hold out in the wild, the blight comes and ruins them again. And I don't know chinkapin trees, so I can't say much on that. But the chestnut tree, we do still have saplings of it. There have been botanists or scientists who have begun to genetically modify them to see if they can get them to develop a better blight resistance. But in terms of reseeding the losses that devastated these, no. And not because of blight specifically, but because so much of that natural landscape that it is native to is gone. It's either been, urbanized, paved over, homes are there, who knows? But I think that the landscape has changed so much that we will never see any kind of population of American chestnut trees like that again, which sucks. Which type of plants have strayed the farthest from what we consider plants? For example, some parasitic plants have stopped producing their own chlorophyll. Are any on the edge of becoming something we would no longer consider plants? So to start this, we have to define what a plant is. And so, like I said, light research. So this is Wikipedia's definition of what a plant is. And what I would say on a very surface level is that a plant has to utilize photosynthesis. So that's kind of what I would think. It's not an end-all be-all. There's exceptions, but even carnivorous plants photosynthesize. So I think that if we want to sort of argue or start a foundation on what a plant is, that's what I would say we can start at as sort of an easy one. Can we find plants that have evolved, like you said, to not produce chlorophyll? And we do. We have this list I got from SUNY Cortland, ghost plant or Indian pipe, beach drops. There's a couple. But right now, based on what I've seen, I don't know that there's any sort of huge evolutionary change that people are finding on a plant evolving. Because if it's not a plant, then what would it be? There's other kingdoms, obviously, but I don't think that there's any plant right now in contemporary 2026 Earth that has really crossed a line from plant to animal or bacteria or, now I can't remember what the other kingdoms are. Animals, vegetables, minerals. Are any plants moving into the animal territory? Not right now. Are they moving into the mineral territory? Not right now. I can't imagine that we'll find anything in our lifetimes that cross that barrier, but never say never. We have not explored so much of the ocean. Weirdly, what's in my head is like Chernobyl and how life is evolving there to live among the radiation. Maybe we'll find it, but right now we don't know of any, and the closest thing we have to a plant evolving away from a so-called standard would be parasitic plants. Again, this is the part of unsatisfying answers. Sorry. But that's all the ones that I can answer. If I missed your question, I apologize. It wasn't that it was a bad question. It was that I didn't know how to answer it. There might have been medical or something, or I just don't know. So those who took the time to give me a question that I was able to answer here, thank you so much. To get your free year of Plantrums Patreon, I've been trying to think about the easiest way to do this. Go to Instagram if you have it. DM me a screenshot of your YouTube that shows your screen name so I know it's you, and then I'll send you the Plantrums Patreon. If you don't have Instagram, you can shoot me an email. My email is on my profile, but please respond within a month. If you can, just that way I can keep track of all of it and make sure that everybody gets what they need. 7 months down the line or something, that would be problematic. So thank you again so much. If you want to see more questions or more problems, solutions, things like that, check out my 10,000 subscriber AMA, or I might revive my Megan Brame YouTube account. Before, there was more for like ADHD stuff, and then but I might revive it for more of like a just off topics kind of stuff. So subscribe to that if you want. If not, no worries. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for 1 million views. Thank you for being such a fucking cool community. I am so humbled by how awesome it is to talk to you guys every day. That is so cool. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.